Hello, this is Daryl Ehrlich, and it's the Billings Gazette's Vietnam Voices series. It's 2 o'clock on Monday, August 31st, and in the studio today I have Gary Booth. Gary, thanks for being a part of this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, can you let's start off and let's begin at the beginning. Let's talk about what life was like before Vietnam. Where were you, and what were you doing before then?
Oh, I lived here in Billings, and I was a mechanic for Houck Transport, which was a tanker company that hauled road oil and gas and diesel in Montana, North and South Dakota, and I worked in the shop servicing and doing mechanic work on the trucks and doing their tire work and just whatever they needed done as the trucks came through. That's what I did.
So born and raised here.
I was born in St. Anthony, Idaho, and my folks moved up here in fall of '48.
So most of your life spent
Been in here.
Okay. And so let's what made you think or how'd you get into the U.S. Army? Let's talk about that.
No, I got one of those letters back in the day we called greetings and salutations from the government.
They wanted to know more about you?
Yeah, come on down and we want to take a physical.
Okay.
Do your physical, and they decide whether you were fit to go in or not, and then they send you home, and 2 to 3 weeks later you got a letter that said what your classification was and whether you was in the position to be drafted or not, and I wound up in the position to be drafted. I was warm and breathing.
Right. Yeah. Right. You couldn't think of an excuse fast enough.
No, not really.
Right.
It worked.
Right. Exactly. So this was 1965.
Yes, summer of '65.
Okay, and you couldn't think of any good enough reason. You weren't married, weren't going to school, anything. So they said you sound like the right kind of person.
I was working.
Okay.
And didn't go to college, so.
Okay, so you were drafted into the Army.
Yes.
So did that? Was that you knew that Vietnam? By that time, Vietnam was just beginning to get going. Did you think that Vietnam might be a real possibility?
Yeah, I figured it probably would be because they were starting to increase the amount of troops they were sending over. So I figured there's only one reason they're drafting all us guys.
Right. Did you know other guys who were going over?
Not at the time we left here.
Okay.
But by the time when they sent us to Butte to get inducted in, then they flew us to Fort Ord, California, and that's where they got our indoctrination or whatever they call it.
Right, yeah, indoctrination.
give you all your fancy uniforms. And
right. It said you're in the Army now.
Done all your aptitude tests and stuff like that to see what you were good at other than probably a rifleman or something. But
what did your aptitude test show?
Well, it was kind of predetermined that I was going to wind up in the medics because I was a conscientious objector.
Okay.
And so when they got all done with their testing, then they wound up shipping me from Fort Ord, California to Fort Sam Houston at San Antonio, Texas, to take basic training, which was a normal basic without the rifle training.
Okay.
And then after that, they went to AIT, Advanced Individual Training, and that's when they trained us to be medics.
Okay. Why did you? What was driving the choice behind conscientious objector status?
Religious.
Okay. Yeah. So you were 1AO. Is that what your draft status? 1A ready objector.
Probably what it was.
Okay. And was it? Did you feel that you were treated differently in the Army because of that status, or did anybody know or care?
Not really. They didn't. As far as the medic training and that, we had about half of the guys were regular trainees that had went through the regular military basic with the rifles and everything.
Right.
And nobody treated us any different there. It was after we got out of training and assigned with our units in the States, and at that time, a medic was just your one extra flunky you had to work with. Whatever the flunky job was, that was yours.
Right. Had you but you had worked driving tankers and things like that before, and then all of a sudden you're a medic. What? Tell me about that work. Was that difficult, challenging? It must have been different than what you had been doing.
Well, it was a whole lot less physical, because when I was working on the trucks and stuff, I was mounting and dismounting tires, and the truck tire usually weighs, between the tire and the steel wheel, you got about 200 or 225 pounds that you're wrestling around and mounting and installing on the trucks, or putting in the racks, to the rack underneath of the trailer to carry the spare, or just putting wheel bearings on. You're wrestling them big tires off
to get to the bearings.
Get to the bearings and brakes and stuff. So it wound up a whole lot less physical work from what I had been and used to. And then that in between basic and AIT, they usually give you a 30-day leave, but with $60 a month pay and all of the things that got deducted out of it, you couldn't buy a plane ticket from Texas to Billings. So myself and about 3 or 4 other guys didn't take that leave. We wound up, one of the guys found on a bulletin board there was a notice to learn to drive military vehicles, a 2-week course, and we just said, hey, let's do that rather than...
That's what you did on your leave.
On our leave. We went and learned how to drive military vehicles for a couple of weeks.
Did you, that must have seemed, after working big trucks, that must have seemed like a better fit.
Yeah, it was kind of fun for me, because the biggest truck they had was a 2.5-ton truck, and I'd been driving big semis, which probably at that time was about 65, 70,000 pound gross trucks driving around. And so it was kind of fun for me, driving all the different Jeeps. And
Did you, was training to be a medic hard?
Not really. It just, they trained you on how to bandage wounds, and if they were real bad, they showed us how to put stitches in to close them up to where they could be enough to get them back to where they could be taken care of better. But sometimes with a real bad cut, you had to kind of close it down a little bit to get it back to the doctors in the rear. And then we learned to give shots and do other things. Just a lot of the stuff we learned to do was like a paramedic does when he gets to a scene of an accident.
Yep.
And then later in the training, we had to learn how to make hospital beds and change the sheets and bedding and stuff, and it had to be, we had to do it with people in the bed, which is sometimes you got people that were hurt bad enough they couldn't get out of bed so you could fix it, so you wound up having to put new sheets, clean sheets and stuff in with them in the bed, so they taught us how to do that. and take care of patients in the might wind up in a hospital unit and working in the wards and in the rear like that.
Yeah. So what happened after you're down in Sam Houston? Then where did you go?
Well, towards the end of training, they give you a list of bases in the States, and so you looked, that in Fort Lewis or Fort Carson was the closest to Montana, so I picked Fort Carson for my first pick and Fort Lewis for my second, and then after our training, then they decided they'd cut orders to whichever base they figured you should go to, and they sent me to Fort Lewis, Washington.
Okay.
And I didn't know till I got out there that was where the 4th Division was training to go over.
To Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So you thought you were getting closer to home, and in reality, you were getting farther from it, but you just didn't know it.
It took a little while to get farther from it, but yeah.
Right. So what did you do at Fort Lewis?
We were kind of attached to the training units. Each training platoon, a medic would go out with them and just be there in case somebody got hurt or got cut or anything that happened. We were there to kind of take care of any emergencies that arose in the training areas.
It's different work than what you were doing. Was it enjoyable in any way?
It was kind of fun. It was different.
Yeah. So then when did you get the notice that you were that Uncle Sam wanted you to travel overseas?
Yeah, towards about 2 weeks from the end of the training for the infantrymen, it was kind of getting rumored around that that's where the division was going to go to Vietnam.
Okay. And then you got word, right?
Yeah, when they got through training, they sent all them guys home for 30 days leave, and being we got our leave just before we showed up there, they gave us 2 weeks leave.
Okay.
And then we went back and packed all our equipment and gear and aid station tents and everything that went with the aid station, and then it was taken down to a ship that was sitting in the harbor at Seattle port. And that was a ship that was going to take the division over when we.
Okay. And did you get to the chance to come back at least Fort Lewis to Billings for a couple weeks, or did you have to stay out there again?
No, I wound up getting to come home for that 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then when we got back out there, we packed all the stuff up and then went down to they boarded us on the ship a week or so early. As soon as our gear was packed, they put us on the boat. And the other guys didn't come back for another week or 10 days after that, from when they got their 30-day leave over.
Okay.
And our mascot at the time for the battalion had to go to a zoo. It was a black panther.
Okay.
And that was a mascot for the 2nd Battalion, 8th Infantry, was a black panther.
Okay. Wow. So was it hard coming back knowing where you're going?
No, well, you knew you was going. You didn't really want to go, but yeah, well, let's go see what it is. Kind of.
Right. Might as well, right?
Yeah, I didn't have any choice at that.
Right. So then did you go to Vietnam on a ship?
Yes.
Wow, that's a little different. How long does it take? I've heard a lot about the long flight just to get over there, but a ship seems like it would take even longer.
I think it took close to about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Give or take a little bit.
What are you doing on that ship? What is there to do on a ship headed for Vietnam on 2 weeks?
No, a lot of the guys played, shot dice, cards.
Okay.
And some of the guys were on, they called it guard duty. They had patrolled around and
right.
watched things. And other than that, it was just kind of walk around the ship, and we'll look at the ocean and
Okay.
try looking for another ship, and we never seen one.
You never saw another ship, huh?
No, I don't think they went close to any
Yeah.
in that canals.
Yeah. So you got to, let's talk about arrival at Vietnam. What was that like?
The ship wound up there wasn't a dock we docked at. We wound up parking out about a quarter mile out in the bay, and they had a barge that they pushed up against the side of the ship, and all the troops went out a door just above that barge onto the barge, and then we loaded into landing craft that took us on in, and then the gate dropped out of the landing craft and we walked on the beach.
Wow. So you took Vietnam by storm.
Well, kind of.
Right. What do you remember about Vietnam once you stepped on in country?
It was different. It was different. First time I'd been to another country, and
Okay.
the difference in the people and the look of the buildings, and we didn't get off that little base area there where they was unloading all of the men and equipment, and everything went into that one little, it'd be a distribution base or something that they had set up for incoming supplies.
Sure.
We never got to leave that base area, but
Okay.
in the day or two before we started convoying up to Pleiku.
Okay. So is it? It looks different than Montana.
Oh yeah, it's a lot hotter,
Yeah.
kind of flat, and we're right on the coast there, so it's the ocean, and you can see some hills back a little ways, but they're not big hills like we're used to here.
Right. They're not mountains. What did you notice about the people, or just how Vietnam looks? I mean, how?
Oh, it's like turning the clock back about 100 years as far as the look of the country.
Really?
You step back. They're not in a hurry to get anywhere. It's not.
Was that kind of shocking?
A little bit.
Yeah.
And
so then you get your supplies, and then did you head to Pleiku?
yes, we convoyed from Quin Yon. That's where our boat docked at, or unloaded us at, and then went from Quin Yon to Pleiku, and with about 5 to 8 miles out of Quin Yon, every bridge had been blown, so the engineers had either made a pontoon bridge or made a road around the bridge down in the low dry wash or out. So it made a slow trip.
Yeah, so that's your first. That may be your first taste that something's not exact. This isn't exactly like home.
Yeah.
When every bridge is blown out.
Yeah, you knew he was where things wasn't real great.
Yeah. What did you guys think? That's got to be kind of a shock, kind of an eye opener, right? I mean, you're now getting a taste of what's ahead, right?
Yeah. Other than that, the country was kind of a pretty country. It was green, and what trees were there. There was, I didn't know at the time, but there were rubber tree, a bunch of rubber trees in the area, and some rice paddies and that. But other than that, the war was there. It was kind of a pretty country.
Right. Very green.
Yeah, and from coming from a farmland area, that everything green like that. Well, that must grow pretty good crops around here.
Right. So it took you a while to get up north then.
Yeah, it took about half a day to get to what they call Anke Pass, and up on that pass there was 2 base camps. One with a Korean base camp, and 1st Cav base camp, and we stopped at the 1st Cav base camp this first trip,
Okay.
and had lunch because it took us about 4 hours to get up there, and then spent about an hour there having lunch, and then spent about another 3 hours or so between there and getting up to Pleiku and out to where the base camp was being set up, which was about 5 or 6 miles west of Pleiku.
Okay. So we talked just a little before the camera turned on. Let's talk about how you build a base camp, because that's a pretty incredible story.
Yeah, well, when we pulled into where the base camp was supposed to be,
I noticed the words "supposed to be."
the engineers had took a dozer and bladed the elephant grass down, and that was a perimeter, and everything inside of that the grass was about 3 feet tall, and unless somebody had walked through it or drove through it, there was no tracks through it, and they got it. Everybody got off the vehicles, and the platoons kind of formed up, and they marched the medic platoon over to the area that was supposed to be our area, and okay, here it is. It's this area here in this grass. You cut the grass so we can put the tents up, and
wow, this feels a lot like camping or something. But you weren't going to a base. Nothing existed, right?
No, we had to set it up.
Wow. So how do you do that? How do you set up a base camp?
Well, you got to put your tents up, or what tents you have. At that time, being the medic's platoon truck came up with us, we had the aid station tent to set up so that we had a place to sleep in. And then there was guys starting to build bunkers and fill sandbags to make the bunkers with, and then that was our job until we got the tents up and the bunkers built. They wanted us doing that.
How long does that take?
It took us about an hour and a half to get the tent up and get it set up so that was up, and then we started filling sandbags to make a wall around the aid station, and we made that wall about chest high all the way around the aid station so that it had some protection in case there was mortar fire coming in or something. But after we got that done, then we had to go help start building up the bunkers on the perimeter, filling sandbags and getting them going.
Right. I've heard that from some vets. Sandbags were what they remember a lot about Vietnam. A lot of filling sandbags. Did you fill a lot of sandbags?
Quite a few that first few days, and then about the third day, they sent word out through the companies, the people that were there, that they wanted volunteers to start running back and forth from Pleiku to Quin Yon to bring up the rest of the supplies, and run back and forth or sit here fill sandbags all day. I think I'd ride in the truck for a while.
Right.
So I volunteered to do that, and being I had gotten that driver's license back in the States.
That's where that 2-week vacation comes in.
Kind of paid off a little bit.
Right.
So we wound up Convoy, and they'd take 7 or 8 trucks, and the extra guys would load into the back of the deuce and a half, and you'd ride down in the back of the trucks. And it took about a day to go back, even though everything was empty because of the slow roads. And go down there and spend the night, and they'd load those trucks up and get more trucks lined up to go back with those. And extra guys would 2 to a truck and a driver and a shotgun, and the next day we'd head back for
Were those convoys dangerous? I mean, was there anybody taking shots at you? Or?
Not at that time. It was kind of, other than the only time we had anything close happen was we'd stopped one lunch day at that Korean camp on K, and a couple of Viet Cong had decided to throw in a couple of grenades at the camp, or else I don't know who they was throwing them
at. Right.
But
that brightened things up.
That woke you up a little bit.
Yeah. Was that the first kind of fire that you'd received, or had you taken others when you?
No, that was the first time we'd been.
What's that like the first time? Because you trained for it, but what's it like when it really happens?
It's surprised. And,
yeah.
You get kind of scared because you.
Yeah. I imagine it's different.
Yeah, and you're sitting there. It's starting to happen.
Yeah, this is what we've heard about. So then you convoy, you keep on. How long does it take to set up a full base camp? Convoy back and forth. How long does this go on?
We was running the convoys back and forth about 6 to 10 convoys, which was 2 days per convoy.
Okay.
And time we got that done, and they didn't need the convoy anymore, the guys that were in base camp had pretty well got the bunkers, perimeter bunkers built, and a lot of the grass cut down that was inside.
So it was looking like a base then.
A little bit.
Right. What was life like on one of those? Tell me what it's like.
At that time of year, you get a lot of rain.
Okay.
And so it's with the grass down, there's a lot of mud, and and the first couple months was there, it rained a lot, because I guess that's the rainy season for them, and the showers weren't set up, so when it rained, you went out and took a shower.
Wow, that's primitive, right? It doesn't get much more primitive than that, I'm guessing.
No, but it works.
Yeah. Was it a warm rain or was it cold?
Yeah, kind of a warm rain.
Okay.
The temperature was kind of like our summer evenings at night, and warmer in the day, but it was.
When you were up there, this is more of plains with some hills, but then it didn't take long before you got into jungle or more thickly forested, correct? Is that what you were telling me, or kind of give me a lay of the land?
This around Pleiku is kind of it's at the edge of the jungle area. Mm-hmm. You're kind of in the like the plains before you get to the hills, where the trees and the hills start, and it was probably 10, 15 miles to the real thick stuff, but within 5 miles you got into some trees and bushes and stuff.
So what was an average day like at the camp, base camp?
Oh, you had, once we got it set up, the medics were giving shots and getting a lot of taking care of any sick people, or some that were kind of thinking they were sick.
Right. Was there a lot of that going on? People thinking they were sick?
There was some of them.
Right. What was the most common injury besides just the injury from battle? What was a common injury? What were you treating, or what was going on? What did you see a lot of?
There was a lot of malaria over there.
Okay.
We had some guys getting malaria, not the first couple of months, but the months that went on, there was a lot of them got malaria.
Now, did you give malaria pills to them?
Well, we didn't. We had to send them, if we was out in the field, we had to send them back, but if we was around camp, we had at the aid station, we had the pills to give them.
Okay.
Malaria.
That's something that we don't see a lot of in Montana.
No, we don't.
Right. Was that was that a shock or a surprise to have to treat people for malaria?
No, they'd in our training they'd told us that we'd probably run across people coming down with malaria.
Okay.
Because that was real prevalent in that over in Vietnam.
Yeah. So when you were back at camp, tell me, like you showered when it rained until they got the shower set up. Are you eating sea rations, or what do you have to eat?
Well, about the time we got done with the convoys, we'd brought up enough of the mess tents and the stoves and stuff so that they could set up the mess tents.
Okay.
And we started eating at the mess tents had to use our mess kits that everybody carried. That was a metal container that had a knife, fork, and spoon in it, and that was your tray.
Wow.
And you had a canteen for coffee or whatever.
Right. Was the food any good?
Well, that beat sea rations by a lot.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
But they did a pretty good job of.
Okay. What when you're at the base camp, you're doing stuff, but as a medic, you're out on a lot of the patrols, the perimeters. Tell me about those kind of operations. What was that like, and where would you go?
Well, out of base camp for a while, before I was assigned to a line company, they were sending out ambush patrols.
Okay.
Every night, and somebody decided that they had to send a medic with every 8 guys that went out, so every one of them ambush patrols wound up getting a medic with them. And it seemed like my number come up about every other night to go on them ambush patrols.
Wow. So what were those? What were you looking for? What were those like? Tell me about those.
Well, we'd late in the afternoon, you'd leave out of base camp, and you had a area that you were going to go to, which was probably 2 or 3 miles out, and into a right close to the jungler where there was trails that the enemy was using, and you'd go out, and the sergeant in charge would decide where along those trails or what in those areas that you'd set up, and you'd set up an ambush patrol and set out flares and some booby traps and see if anything came along to set them off.
How often did that happen, that something would be set up?
It only happened one time with the patrols I was with.
Okay.
And it was along about 10 o'clock in the evening when one flare got tripped, and within 30 seconds another flare got tripped, so there was probably about 8-10 enemy had tripped it, and then the firefight started. And it was tracers going both directions there for quite a little while. Right.
So it was pretty intense.
Yeah, for a little while. And
how long do these last? What's a little while?
20, 30 minutes.
Okay. Does it seem like longer?
Yeah.
What's a medic doing? Because obviously you're not armed. You've got all of your stuff. What does a medic do during those firefights?
Well, as long as nobody gets injured, you don't have to do anything.
Okay.
And I usually stayed with around the sergeant in charge of the patrol and the radio operator.
Okay.
And that night we had the sergeant in charge and myself was the only 2 that were kind of experienced. The others were green troops that had just come in that day from training from the States.
Wow.
And the grass where we had set the ambush up was about 18, 20 inches tall, and the sergeant had trained these squad that was out, and he was telling them, fire just above the grass, fire just above the grass. Sitting there, yeah, right, 18 inches tall, Charlie's crawling in, and he did.
Right.
He throwed in a grenade and a tear gas canister, and the only thing helped us was that the breeze was from us towards them, so the canister gas didn't do it.
I was going to ask, how did you end up not getting yourself on that, but the wind?
The wind moved it back towards them, and
Did but if someone was hurt, then what? How did your job change?
Well, I'd have to go to wherever they were hurt and try and take care of them, fix up what I could,
Yeah.
and drag them back in off of a perimeter or back in a little bit from what was going on.
That must have, okay, so you're lugging 225-pound tires may have served you well in that case. You knew how to lug people. About the same. So you did ambush patrols. What else did they have you going out in the jungle? Would you be mostly back at the kind of the company fire base camp, or would you be out doing patrols, other stuff?
Well, other than the ambush patrols around the camp, during the days, they had found out I had spent a summer working on construction, and they had brought in some prefab frameworks to put wooden floors in the tents, and I wound up helping put those floors together for about 2 or 3 weeks between until they needed to send me out into the field with the company, because we'd had a couple of medics start getting drunk all the time out there, and they had to pull them out of the field.
How did this may seem I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You're a ways away. How do you get drunk in the middle of Vietnam?
That was one of the questions I had too.
Oh, okay.
But at certain times, they had a beer ration, and if you didn't, a lot of the guys didn't want to drink while I was in the field. So if they got their beer ration, they just hang on to it, and I guess these guys had collected all their beer rations
and cut loose. So you had to go back because of that. Was it hard attending to wounded soldiers?
It was, well, it was my job, and whether it wasn't, sometimes it wasn't too bad, but it was different times and different situations.
Did you feel you're equipped enough to handle it? I mean, or that seems like a tough job. You're not only under usually fire, but now someone's hurt and you've got to try and save their life. That's a lot of pressure on a person.
Well, it was our job, so that's what we did.
Okay. So tell me about what it was like. You talked a little bit about, you've got some photos. What's it like in the jungles of Vietnam?
It reminded me of walking through the forests in the mountains of Montana, except they were a little thicker and a lot more underbrush.
Okay.
But it was similar in a way. Okay.
And did being from Montana help you in any way to navigate that?
Well, as far as it might have, because I was used to, I'd went on hikes and stuff up in the mountains around and kind of had an idea how you navigate through the trees and brush, and I guess guys that have never been around the mountains and the forest, it's new. They didn't know how to navigate, but
yeah. What's the did you guys, because you're out there, you're not necessarily setting up in the jungle all the time, although when you were out for 7 or 10 days you were, but when you're back at base, did the enemy send RPGs or mortars or anything in at you? Were you under fire a lot?
Not at our base camps. We wound up at the time I was in the base camps, we never got any mortar fire or RPG fire in at us at that time. But it was they started that while we were, at the time we were doing most of our patrolling, they'd started mortaring the fire bases and rear bases.
Okay. So what's a patrol like? What do you do there?
Oh, you got somebody that tells your platoon, we wound up being company size at this time, and they they tell, okay, you're going to certain areas, you're going to look for certain things, or you're looking for anything out there that that the enemies put up or find where they've been, and so then you go out and search for them, and if you find anything, you destroy it.
What kind of things would you look for?
Oh, we'd look for hooches, which was more or less a primitive house, and if we found them and we figured that where they were, if they were in where the enemy had been, we'd destroy them. And one time we came up on a North Vietnamese hospital area. There was a couple of operating room areas, and they had morphine vials, the little glass morphine vials laying all over the area where they'd used them, and then there was about 6 or 8 hooches that had set up for putting stretchers in for wounded. And we'd went through and picked up anything that was useful as far as intelligence, and then after we made sure there wasn't anything left that could be used, we burned it so they couldn't use it no more.
What was it like out in the field? You'd be gone for 7 to 10 days, is that right?
Yeah.
On these patrols?
Well, I was in between resupply. We sometimes, until we got back to a fire base, it'd be up to 2 or 3 weeks out patrolling.
That's basically camping for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
In near sea rations and survival mode, right?
Yeah.
How did you do that? How do you keep on going for 3 weeks? Did you get sore, tired?
No, you get tired, but you get used to it.
Okay. And every day you're digging bunkers, right?
Yeah. Every late afternoon they'd stop early enough we could dig a bunker and cut some trees down, make a roof on it, and
that's where you. if something happened, that's where you went. Did you see the enemy? Did you get the sense that they were there?
It was hard. You couldn't see that far in the jungle with all the brush, and it was hard to spot them because they were as good at it as some of us were getting. They could hide out in there
Did you guys have to learn how to kind of hide out in the brush? And if so, what were the techniques?
Oh, you just, like when we was cutting trails, we developed a way of cutting a trail that was hard to follow.
Okay.
And most of the guys that were doing the cutting the branches or leaves and stuff to make the trail, they'd make a downward cut, and it'd leave an open cut on the twig facing up. And we decided, that's an open way to have your trail followed. So we started cutting them the other way, so that the cut faced down, and made it hard to follow our trail, unless you knew what you were looking for.
Wow! So there were those techniques.
Yeah, that was one that we developed, or my platoon had developed.
Yeah. What about what about all that time out there? You didn't. You'd go in for resupply. Would a chopper fly to you every 6-7 days for a resupply, or how did you get supplied? And then how did you get water?
The water we got from streams and creeks that we crossed, and we only ran across the stream about every second or third day, so we carried up to four canteens at least per man. And we'd, every time we crossed a creek, we'd fill our canteens. Yeah. And as far as the food and ammunition supplies, that was brought in by helicopter at 7 to 10 day intervals.
That's a long time. Did you feel alone in there? I mean, you've got your other, the other troops that are there with you. You're 7 to 10 days before you're feeling like you're back on. You're in any kind of civilization. Did you feel kind of lonely in those places?
No, it was just, you kind of got used to it. It's just like doing other jobs. Okay,
Yeah.
Today we get up and we walk through the jungle. Get up.
And every day, get up today, tomorrow, walk through the jungle. So you'd be walking, looking for certain things but did it ever, is it monotonous doing that day after day?
It can get that way.
Yeah.
But you had to stay alert. And that was one of the things you had to stay alert and not get used, kind of complacent to what was going on.
Right. What was your least favorite part of doing that?
Setting up the bunkers at night.
Yeah. So you had to do that on top of walking through the jungle.
Yeah.
I bet you were just dead tired at the end of the night. I mean, it's hot. You're not eating particularly well. You're digging. You're marching. You must just have been exhausted.
Well, we didn't get completely exhausted. We would. I don't know if we worked it different than others did or not, but every so often we'd stop and take a 5-minute break, and so we never were really completely wore out.
Okay.
And we'd stop at lunchtime and have our lunch, but you weren't completely wore out. I didn't feel like it, and I don't think a lot of the other guys did either. We weren't completely wore out, but some days were long. And
yeah. Was there any connection to back home? Did you have any, or are you so far and so remote? What kind of communication was there?
When we got resupplied, if you had any mail, it came in with the resupply.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
That must have been a little bit of comfort or relief when you.
Yeah, it was.
What did you know about? So you're going through there, and you're not over there. Well, a little, but not before kind of public sentiment kind of turned a little on Vietnam late in '68. What was the support? What did you hear from back home when you were over there?
No, we didn't hear it. It was still getting pretty. The support from home was pretty good.
Okay.
At that time.
Okay. Yeah, and had you come from the military? Had anybody in your family fought in the military?
My great-grandfather and his brothers fought in the Civil War.
Okay, so it'd been a while.
It had been a while.
Right.
and I'd had some uncles that were in the service in the 40s, but they never talked much about it.
Right. Let's talk about it was February, right? February 21st. When you were in, or when you were injured.
That was 21st.
21st. Let's talk about that. What was going on, and how did that happen?
We've been patrolling most of the day and was getting into an area, and they decided it looked good enough there was enough openings that we could set up a fairly good perimeter, and we were just stopped and had started to set up, and every time we'd stopped to set up a perimeter deal, we'd send out 2 patrols, one 180 degrees from each other, and they'd go out a couple hundred yards and then make a right turn and then sweep back around and come back in 180 degrees from where they'd went out. And those patrols had gone out, and they were almost to where they were going to make their right turn, and one of the point men heard somebody chambering around, and he yelled a warning, and the shit hit the fan.
Really? Yeah. And what happened after that warning? So you heard the call warning, right?
No, I didn't hear the call warning, but
okay.
As soon as he hollered, it saved some of his guys. But then the ambush cut loose on them, and within a couple of minutes, they were trying to set an ambush up on the other side of the area for the other patrol, and within a couple of minutes, they were under fire.
Wow.
And then we were catching fire
both way
on the perimeter where we was at.
Wow.
And and it was getting fire from just about everywhere, and we hadn't even dug in or nothing. Well, the only thing we had was some trees to try and use for protection.
Right. What do you do in that moment? What do you do?
You find a tree that's big enough to kind of hide you a little bit, and a little tree gets pretty big. Then you can just about crawl in your helmet and say, "Come on, come on."
A little tree gets pretty big then. Yeah. So are people injured, and then how does that work with a medic?
Well, we were starting to get about 10 minutes into it, we was starting to get some wounded. But I had told all of the guys in the platoon I was with, don't holler medic and expect me to come. You holler doc.
Okay.
Because that was if the enemy heard medic, the next guy moving was the one they shot.
Okay.
Because they knew it was going out for trying to get the wounded. So when they hollered doc, and I had to go over to a machine gun position that the gunner had a wound in his shoulder, and I get to looking, and he's holding the barrel in the 60 because a bullet had shot away the barrel lock, and it went back and clipped his shoulder. And I patched up his shoulder and gave him an extra bandage to put in his hand so he could hold that barrel into the 60 because it was getting pretty warm.
Wow.
And I went back to where my position was, and by now they had sent out OPs, which was an observation post.
Yep. And
they called in the observation post, and he was coming back in. He was out in front of me in the perimeter, and he come back he was about 25, 30 yards out when he got hit. And I tried to get him to crawl in, do anything, and I couldn't get him to even move. So I wound up, I hollered down the line, I says, "Cover me, I'm going out and get him." And I ran out and picked him up and carried him back into the perimeter and got him behind the tree where I was, and started patching him up. And as I started patching him up, the bark starts coming off of the tree right around my head.
Really?
And if I moved left, they'd come off on the left side of the tree, and if I moved a little bit right, it'd come off the right side of the tree. And what I had done by getting him back in was Charlie always tried to drop somebody out about that far out and use him as to draw more guys out to get him in. And when I'd hollered at the guys to cover me that I was going out, they sent out a barrage big enough that everybody ducked out there, and I had time to go get him and bring him back, and it upset them real bad.
Right. So they were mad.
Yeah, kind of.
So you brought him back, and you were trying to fix him up, and yeah, you were taking some fire too on both. You're getting bark was raining down. What are your thoughts then? Is it to try to help him? Is it try to get down? How do you even think in that situation?
Well, the first thing was get him patched up so that he's all right.
Yeah. How badly was he hurt?
He'd got wounded in the back, and it wasn't too bad. He wasn't bleeding too bad, so I got him patched up, and the bleeding slowed down. And then they got a little bit, another 5 or 10 minutes, I had to go back to the machine gun position because he'd got shot in the foot. And
it's a tough day for him.
Yeah, it was. And while I was over there trying to patch up his foot, that's when he got me in the leg. Broke my leg just between the knee and the hip. And when I looked at it, I guess I got another joint there because it had slipped out to the left from where it should have been. And a couple of the guys in the platoon drug me back in off that machine gun position, and a couple of the other medics from one of the other companies platoons came over and put a splint on my leg.
Did you? I imagine you felt it right away, or did you have so much adrenaline and you were paying attention to the foot? How quickly did you realize that?
No, almost instantly, because the bullet had damaged the femur, broke the femur, and damaged the sciatic nerve. And
so
with the nerve damage, it hurt like heck.
Yeah, I imagine so. So they put you in a splint, and then what? Then you needed a medic. You needed a doc yourself.
Yeah. Well, then I couldn't get around because with that splint I couldn't move. So I wound up. They covered me with a poncho, and I laid there the rest of the night.
Wow.
And we was getting mortar fire, and some of it was explosive rounds, and some of it was white phosphorus rounds, which is a kind of a chemical.
Yep.
That if you get it on you, it burns. When one of them went off inside the perimeter, not far from us, it had white smoke in all directions from when that went off, but it was in just far enough that it didn't get the guys on the perimeter, and there wasn't anybody behind us that it got anyway. It was just didn't get anybody. But
wow, that had to be scary. So you're laying there all night as this is still going on, unable to move.
Yeah,
that sounds like sheer terror.
Well, it can be.
Yeah. What did you think about to pass the time, or did you even? I mean, what do you do during those moments?
Don't think about much. We had we'd called the artillery in, and the artillery was laying barrages just outside our perimeter, and the shrapnel. The reason they'd put the poncho over me was because the shrapnel was landing all over us, and so all night long the shrapnel was flying in and landing on the poncho. And some of them pieces were pretty warm. That's why they'd put the poncho on me, so that when they hit, they'd cool down before they.
Wow. So you were they put that on there to protect you from burning flying metal.
Yeah.
That's pretty intense. Did you think you're gonna make it out of there?
Yeah, I didn't think of it at the time.
Okay.
So it wasn't one of the things we was thinking about right then.
So even though you were hit, were you bleeding really badly, or did they patch you up well enough?
Too bad. They bandaged it up, and lucky it hadn't hit an artery or anything. It just
right. So then then what happened? So this firefight goes on all night. They call in the artillery. You've got some backup. You told me that before we talked, it was a bad night for medics, right? I mean, it was a pretty dangerous night for medics.
Yeah, there was. I got hit, and one of the other medics got wounded, and then a friend of mine, he was with the company commander. He treating the wounded guy, and I don't know, he had one or two wounded guys there that he's taking care of, and he heard a mortar round coming in, and he fell over those wounded guys, and the mortar round hit him in the back and killed him.
So you had 5 medics, and 3 of them were either injured or killed.
Yeah.
Wow. It's a tough night.
Yeah, it was.
Was this the NVA? This was the North Vietnamese?
North Vietnamese. They were the North Vietnam regulars that were coming down. And coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and where we was patrolling was right where the Ho Chi Minh Trail comes into Vietnam, one of the main routes into Vietnam there.
Right. So they're fighting pretty tough, and they've got...
Yeah.
This isn't necessarily this is warfare in the jungle.
Yeah, and
It seems like it would be awfully loud
yeah, it is. It gets pretty loud
when
everything's going on.
yeah. So how did you finally get out of that situation?
By morning, the enemy had pulled out, and then they sent out some patrols and made sure they'd pulled out, and then they started blowing trees down to make an LZ, and we wound up. Our battalion everybody carried 2 or 3 pounds of TNT per man, so we had TNT to blow a landing zone if we had to, instead of cutting it.
Okay.
And in an hour or so, they had a landing zone, so they'd bring in the choppers to start evacuating the wounded.
How many people were wounded in that?
I think we wound up with about 42 wounded and 8 killed that night in our company.
Wow, and how many were out fighting? How many are in a company? So 48 and...
they're about 120 to 130. There's 3 platoons of infantry, which is about 32 to 35 per man. A weapons platoon, which is similar number of men. And then a squad with the company commander. There's 5 or 6 with him. So
in that company, if you had 42 and 8, 100, we'll make it nice, easy numbers. 150, you are 50 out of you had a third of the men injured or wounded or killed in that. That's pretty. That's a pretty intense fight.
Yeah, it was. We were kind of lucky that night because a lot of times the casualties were a lot worse.
So they made an LZ, and then were they able to get you out?
Yeah, they got us, evac'd us out from there back to the battalion aid station, and they done what they could there, and the ones that had to be sent on out to rear hospitals were sent out, and it was a hospital at Bong Song base that they sent a lot of us that had broken bones and stuff that had to be evac'd back.
And so were you at the forward aid, or did they just kind of ship you on to
No,
Bong
it was
Song?
our forward aid.
Okay.
They went from the field to that aid station, probably might have been back at our fire base.
Okay. How long did that take to get from forward to...
Oh, probably 15, 20 minutes from the time the chopper went, lifted off till it landed where the aid station was.
So how long was it from when you were shot to when you were back into a hospital that could really get to your problem?
It was probably about 4 or 5 in the afternoon when I got wounded, and it was the next afternoon probably when we got to the rear hospital.
That's a long day.
Yeah.
Did you so what was the diagnosis when you finally got there, and what happened then when you were there at the hospital?
They said that I knew the femur was broke, and I didn't. And they said there was nerve damage, and they put me in a body cast. Full body cast clear up to under your chest.
That seems almost unnecessary, but I guess.
Well, they done that so that you could be sent back to a hospital in Japan, and then they'd put you in traction when you got back there for the broken femur.
Okay. Is that what happened?
Yeah,
So they put you in a full body cast, and then are you? What does your family know? How do they find out, and what are people back here in the States doing?
They didn't know for a few days because I wound up not letting anybody tell them until I could write them.
Okay.
I wrote them. And
Why didn't you want anybody to tell him? Why did you need to write him?
because I didn't want the military showing up at the house, and the way they usually means somebody's getting killed. But,
Yeah.
and so about 4 or 5 days after I got hurt, I wrote a letter to my dad and telling him I'd had a broken leg and I was in the hospital, but I was all right.
Yeah.
That's all he knew about it until I got back stateside.
Okay. So, and are you single at this time?
Yes.
Okay. So you go back to, and then they put you in traction. Where did you end up doing traction? Putting in where were you?
The military hospital in Japan.
Okay.
And can't remember the name of that hospital.
So you left Vietnam in a transport, I'm guessing plane, and a medical transport plane. Correct?
Yeah, C-40. One of the big was a C-47 or something like that, big, and it was set up so they could put stretchers along the sides, a couple deep on each side, and
So you were on a plane with a whole bunch of other injured people. Mm-hmm. What was that like?
It was. They kind of gave us enough medicine where we didn't feel too much.
Fair enough. So you don't remember a lot, or what you do wasn't.
It was a noisy flight because it wasn't like a commercial plane. There wasn't as much insulation and stuff to where you didn't hear the engines. You could hear the engines throbbing most of the time.
Right. And then so you're in Japan and they put you in traction.
Mm-hmm.
How long?
About 7 weeks, and then they decided that the bone wasn't knitting together.
Okay.
And then they had to they put a pin in. They took me into surgery and put a metal pin in to hold the bone together, and done a bone graft around the break to make it heal. And about a week later, they sent me back to Madigan General Hospital at Fort Lewis, Washington.
Okay. And that's when you told you told your family, or when your family knew the full extent?
Once I told them that I was back in the States, and I don't think I told them for sure what happened until they drove out to visit me at the hospital, and that's when I told them what exactly happened. I just told them up till then that he broke a leg.
What was their reaction when they finally found out?
My dad said, I knew there was something else going on, but he said he wasn't gonna.
All right. And your mom wasn't happy, right?
She had passed.
Okay.
About 5 or 6 years prior to going in the service.
So your dad said he thought something else was going on.
Yeah, him and my brother.
Okay.
No, just him, because my younger brother was in the service and he was at the hospital in Japan as a medic there, working in one of the wards there.
Wow. So how long did it take you to recover?
I got back to the States in probably about late May, early June of '67, and with the nerve damage, it took until the next May before I was recovered enough that they'd let me out of the hospital, and I was bad enough that they put me out on a disability from the service.
Okay. So that's a lot of rehab, because that's a fairly high strike. Bone break, they had to graft it, they had to pin it, and then you had nerve damage. That probably took some real recovery, didn't it? I mean, what was coming back to normal?
It was a lot of therapy to get the muscles. While I was in traction, the muscles didn't move, and I couldn't move them because of the nerve damage. And by the time they got back to the States and they were in therapy, it was almost 2.5, 3 months from when the injury occurred. So the muscles weren't very strong anymore, and it took a long time to get the muscles to working and figuring out how to walk again.
Yeah. Does it? How does this being injured in Vietnam, did that change how you saw things in life?
It might have.
Okay. In what way do you think? Maybe.
You just kind of you look at things a little different than most people do, and as far as how you react to some things.
Yeah. In what way do you think you react differently than had you never been to Vietnam?
It's kind of well, it's hard to say.
Okay. What now for your actions, including saving people in the midst of battle, you have both a Bronze Star with a V designation, and then you also have a Purple Heart. That was for that particular for your service, correct?
Yes, for that things that went on that day that I got shot.
Yeah. Tell me about the V on the V on the Bronze Star.
It's for valor, I guess.
As you're trying to save others, tell me about how you were given the Purple Star or Purple Heart. Excuse me.
I was in Japan at the hospital and in traction, and an officer, can't remember what his rank was, but he came in and he had a photographer with him, and they took some pictures, and he pinned the Purple Heart on, and he gave me the Bronze Star in the box, and then there was a reporter that did an interview after they were done, and he did an interview of what went on over there before during the time that they decided to give me the Bronze Star and a Purple Heart.
How did that feel, getting a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star? What was your reaction?
No, I figured all I was doing my job. I just didn't figure I'd done anything out of what I was supposed to do.
Right. This is what did your family think of those awards, or what do they think now?
Up until a few years ago, my son and grandsons didn't even know I had them.
Why?
Because I never talked about it or never mentioned it or anything.
Huh. Did they know you'd been injured?
Yeah, they knew I'd got injured.
Right.
But I never talked about my time in the service.
Yeah. What was so after you were released, you were discharged with a disability. Then what happened to you next? Because here it'd been part of your life, and now you're discharged. You're a civilian again.
The timing of the year that I got discharged, I had been drafted from my job, and they was just starting on their road oil season about the time I got back from being discharged. So I went back to work for the tanker company in the shop, working on the trucks again.
Did it feel? Had you felt like anything had changed, or did it feel just? How did it feel jumping back into that?
Oh, that was pretty much the same, but the attitude of like friends I had before I went in, and when I got back, I didn't fit with them anymore, and
why was that? What didn't fit about it?
They had new friends, and you just didn't fit in with the with them anymore. It just,
Mm-hmm.
it just, kind of hard to explain. It just,
Yeah.
You-
So how did you cope with that? Because all of a sudden you come back, you got the same job, but now your friends who were your friends aren't. It must be kind of lonely.
yeah, kind of, it gets that way. You just you kind of cope with it. But it was just, you just wound up being a loner for a while.
How did you manage? Was reintegration? So reintegration wasn't especially easy. You had to go through physical therapy, and then the friends that you'd had kind of left. So how did you manage to find a new group of friends and all of that?
I had been around the trucking industry since I was a kid because my dad owned trucks and drove trucks.
Okay.
And the people in that industry, if you were in that industry, you was another trucker. It was kind of, it was just kind of another group that you could get into, and it wasn't,
Right.
they didn't care what happened.
Right.
Back the road, down the road, it was, if you was trucking or you was a trucker, you was all right.
Did you have any? I noticed. You walked in today. You're walking pretty darn near normal. What kind of residual pain or problems did you have with your leg, or did it heal up pretty near full strength, or have you had problems?
Oh, it took a lot of years.
Okay.
The doctors, when they discharged me, said I'd walk with a cane forever, and
You didn't walk in with a cane today.
I put it in my head that I was going to get off that cane and not have to depend on that cane, and it took a while. If I get tired or real tired of full day's work or something, I limp a lot. But
Yeah.
It's got to be your mindset that it's not going to bother you.
Right. Did it bother you? Speaking of bothering you, did it bother you? Obviously, when you came home, there probably the sentiment and the public perception of the war had begun changing, and people. This was not as a popular war. How did you deal with that, knowing you had seen the worst of war? You'd seen people injured and died. You yourself had been seriously injured. How did that work when people were protesting a war, and yet you'd been over there and you'd seen it?
You had to just kind of walk away,
Okay.
or there was going to be trouble.
Yeah. Yep. Are you proud of your service?
Yeah.
Good. Looking back on it now, it's been almost 50 years. How do you view the war now that you look back on it and plenty of time has passed? Has your view on the war changed at all?
Not too much, because I think when our division went over, we had a mindset that we're going to war, whether they say it's a war or not. We're going to war.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that mindset, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
And after we'd been there a little while, we decided we're going to make them die for their country, not us. So we always had our artillery and gunships with close-in support all the time.
Yeah.
And when we were out patrolling, every hour or hour and a half, they'd send out a smoke round so that the artillery, and that round they'd plot it in just real close to our location. And so the artillery knew within a few hundred yards of exactly where we were at all times. So the artillery was...
So you felt comforted by that?
Oh, yeah.
The artillery always knows where you're at. Yeah.
And if the artillery knew, then the gunships and Puff the Magic Dragon would too.
That's right. What? How did you? You're sitting in recovery. Takes a long time for you. What do you think about while you're laying in that hospital bed, and how do you manage with that?
That was kind of tough because it back in them days they didn't give you much therapy for coming out of a war zone,
mm-hmm.
and so you done most of the whatever therapy was you done it yourself.
Yeah.
And a lot of the therapy that most of the guys used was alcohol.
Yeah.
And
so you can see why some of them drank or tried to run away with drugs or whatever. Did you have those? Did you being that you saw the action and were injured? Did you have that PTSD? Did you have? Did you? Was it a problem later on for you?
Yeah, I had it. I still got it.
Okay.
And you just kind of learn to live with it.
Right.
And but it's
there.
It's there.
Do you have? So you left the country in a medevac airplane. Do you have any desire to go back?
It would be interesting to go back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To see the area again, but from what I hear, the area has grown up.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that Pleiku now, the town of Pleiku covers where our base used to be, because I've been told that a couple of guys that went back over said Pleiku, the city of Pleiku is about 10 or 15 times bigger than it was at the time we was there.
Wow.
But
when your son and grandson learned that you have a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, what was their reaction?
Well, kind of. They didn't know that I had it. Then they kind of, wow.
Yeah. Was that kind of fun?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. When one of the reasons we're doing this is because, we not only want to. 50th anniversary, in truth, is probably a good excuse to collect stories and to get them, but part of the value is going forward. When people look 50 years from now and say, okay, what was it like for people in Montana or people who are from Montana or lived in Montana? What was it like for them in there? What do you want people to remember about the Vietnam War from your perspective?
If the politicians had stayed out of it, the military probably would have won it.
Yeah. That's the truth. There's not everybody's experience has been different except for that one. That one's pretty much universal. So, what did you take also in that fight? Did you take some shrapnel too?
No, it was just
the bullet.
Just the bullet.
It's enough for me. I don't think I'd take either. Is it do you think America's attitude about Vietnam, from your perspective, because at first you came home, your friends had changed. What I've heard from some of the vets is that they think that people's experiences about Vietnam, or not experiences, their perception of Vietnam has changed. Do you think people are more accepting of Vietnam vets today, or is it still kind of a not talked about?
I think there's kind of a lot of the people that were against it during the years that they were against it, I think they still hold it against the vets.
Okay.
But with the wars that we've been in the last few years, I think their feeling towards some of the vets is changing to where they're accepting them as rather than the way they treated some of them.
Yeah. So you think that there might be what Vietnam had to endure, which is soldiers not necessarily being thanked and not being appreciated, that at least has changed a little today?
I think it has.
Yeah.
Especially for the ones coming back from Iraq and and Afghanistan. I think it's changed for them.
Yeah, yeah. Was overall was the experience? How would you classify your experience in Vietnam? Was it a good thing, a bad thing? Is there any way? Is that even a question that can be answered?
No, kind of a learning experience.
Yeah,
I would say.
yeah. What was the biggest learning experience of Vietnam for you, for Gary? Maybe not for everyone else, but what was the number one thing you learned?
No matter what you do, you can't figure out what the outcome's going to be. It's not all in your hands.
Yeah, that's true. It wasn't. What we've talked for a while. I made you tell me a lot of stories, but I always feel bad because at the end I always think to myself, well, I've tried to condense somebody's story in an hour or two. That's hard to do. What am I missing? Have I missed any of the stories, or what haven't we touched on?
Oh, there was one time when we was on patrol, and my platoon was always the lead for the company, point for the company, and the guys behind us, their point man didn't like our trail, and he was trying to cut a better trail, and he wound up cutting himself. And with me being close to the rear of my platoon, I had to drop back and patch him up. And in the few minutes it took to get him patched up, maybe 5 minutes or a little better, and they start moving again to catch up, and the point man lost the trail.
Huh.
And so the company, the officer in that platoon called my platoon and said, send somebody back. Show us how to get back up there. And he said, no way. I'm not sending nobody back there in enemy territory by himself. That's a suicide mission.
Right.
He says, is our doc still back there? And he says, yeah. Well, he'll show you how to get there. And that officer said, there ain't a medic alive can be a point man and lead us back to you. And they had a little argument, and when they got done, I wound up having to go up and lead them, follow the trail, find the trail where they lost it, and follow the trail up to the...
And you did?
Yeah.
How hard was that?
Yeah, finding where the other guy had lost the trail took me a few minutes. And then once I found where he had lost the trail, because I was looking for the cut...
The undercut.
Undercut on him. And when I found it, and I started off down the trail, and that point man said, how the hell can you follow that? I said, simple, right there, watch.
That is so you knew how to do that. There wasn't a medic. So you made him eat his words.
Well, kind of, but most of the officers, it was kind of, the medics were the flunkies, and they didn't know nothing, and that's kind of the way they thought of the medics.
Right. After you got out, you'd been trained as a medic. I haven't met a medic yet. Now, maybe I just haven't met the right one. Whoever stayed in, wanted to go for a career in medicine. Did you have any desire to go back, or were you done with your medics?
Well, it might have been a good job if I could have settled down, but
right.
With everything that you went through, in an emergency room or something, that's a confined area, and it's not a place you want to be very, very often for a while. It takes years to get over that.
I imagine so. So being out trucking was a good fit.
It put me out by myself or out with wasn't around a lot of people, and you had
time to think.
Yeah.
So that actually being alone and being able to process was helpful.
I think it was for me.
Yeah. Was there a time? I mean, maybe it was that on the stretcher when you thought, I'm not going to make it back. Did you think that thought, or did you just never? Because if I'm sitting on a stretcher with a poncho over me and I hear gunfire and smell, or not smell, but white phosphorus is being used. I'm thinking, this is a pretty tough situation. How am I going to get out of this one?
Well,
If it was a TV show, it would have cut to commercial right then and there.
it's kind of funny because a couple of days before that, I had a funny feeling that my number'd come up.
Oh, really?
And you get that feeling, and nobody argues with you. It's just something you don't do. And when I did get hit, hey, I ain't dead yet. I'm going to make it. It kind of changed my attitude.
Really? That's interesting, because getting hit by a bullet, if I got hit by a bullet, it would change my attitude, but not for, hey, I'm going to make it. But I imagine with that, yeah.
Well, you get that feeling, and it's usually, a lot of times when you get that feeling, you don't make it.
Yeah.
And you never know, but I'm saying, okay. So far, you
didn't necessarily dodge the bullet. The bullet got you, but not like that. Yeah. Huh. That's really interesting. Did you? Was it hard when you were laying in a hospital bed, not being? I mean, you're in traction. You're in a body cast. Just none of that sounds fun. Is it hard not getting down in the dumps and feeling kind of depressed?
I think everybody'd get down. You get down the dumps and depressed some.
Okay.
You kind of gotta think about other things and getting out of there. And
what did you miss about Montana? Whether you're in Vietnam or in a hospital bed, what did you want to get back in order to do?
Oh, my brothers and friends used to do a lot of hiking along the rims and up in the different places, hiking and getting out in the open. And
you're looking forward to that.
Yeah.
What did you do when you came back? What did you go right? You were right into, well, you said road oil season. So did you get right back to work, or did you have any fun, or was there anything? What were you really looking forward to, or got to do when you came back?
Well, I couldn't get around. I was getting around, but I was limping and pretty bad yet. So I couldn't do much hiking, but I could get around, and I would drive up to like Red Lodge or drive around and look at things.
Yeah.
You couldn't walk around much, but I could drive and get out and look around a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So explore, and again, going back to that driving.
Yeah.
Red Lodge was a different place back then too, I imagine.
Yeah, it was a little bit different. It was.
Yep. Well, is there anything else that I've missed? Because I've kept you talking a lot, and I certainly appreciate it. Is there anything else that I've missed?
Oh, I probably missed something, but
I probably did, but that's the nature of all. Gary, I want to say thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story with me, and thank you for your service. Thank you for going over there, and thank you also. It's been an honor to talk to you, and thanks. You were willing to risk everything, and also you're injured, and so a special thank you to you for
thank you for doing this project.
You bet. This has been Daryl Ehrlich with the Billings Gazette and our Vietnam Voices series.